Okay, everybody, good evening. Welcome once again to our series on the Tikunei Zohar. Again, the Tikunei Zohar are 70 different explanations of the first word of the Torah, the first word of the Bible, Bereshit, in the beginning. And this word forms different permutations, and the permutations, we've been discussing one of them per week, and these permutations are very enlightening as to how the Zohar sees concepts. So, here is the word Bereshit. As you can see, some of the letters are highlighted here in red. The letters that are highlighted in red spell the word Boshet. I'll explain what that means. So, tonight's Tikun, which is Tikun 7, discusses the permutation of the word Bereshit as Yira Boshet. Yira means fear or awe, and Boshet means shame. We have to understand what this is all about. What is Yira Boshet? Fear and shame, or the fear of shame, or fear which is on the level of shame. Now, what is this all about, and what is the Zohar talking about? What does it want us to understand here? And what does that have to do with the beginning of creation? So, let's first talk about the concept of fear. As everybody knows, fear can be a very debilitating thing. And very often, people who are prone to all kinds of fears have a very tough life. Fears are something that holds a person back and prevents him or her from acting, and all kinds of anxieties and phobias of fears can keep a person back. But that's only fear in the negative sense. In the positive sense, fear itself has a positive connotation in Jewish thought, and certainly in Kabbalistic thought. The concept of fear is related to the Sfirot, to the tree of the Sfirot, and basically is related to the Sfira of Gevura, the Sfira of Gevura. Let me just get up a chart of the Sfirot, and I'll explain this. It's not cooperating. 1 second. Here we go. All right. I have to share screen again. 1 second. Okay. Here is a chart of the Sfirot. And the Sfira that is associated with fear is the Sfira of Gvura. The Sfira of Chesed is associated with love. Chesed, literally translated, means kindness. Gvura means a number of different things. It could mean strength. It could mean harshness. It could mean bravery. As I said, physical strength. But it can also mean dealing with fears. The concept of Gvura is basically the negative side of Gvura is called Pachad. Pachad means fear. And once one gets into these concepts of fear, obviously that can have very negative consequences. Talk to any psychologist and they'll tell you that half the people that come to see them have phobias of one sort or another. I don't know if half is exactly the right distribution, but nevertheless, there's many. We have a couple of psychologists online. They could certainly tell us if that is correct. In any event, that is all in terms of negative fear. However, there is the concept of positive fear. What is positive fear? Positive fear is not fear of something outside of yourself in that sense. It's not the fear of something else, the fear of God, which is really, fear means not fear in the sense of, in the negative sense that you're trying to hide away, although that is a possibility as well. But fear rather means in the sense that I would like to talk about, fear here doesn't mean, as you can see here, I've got up another chart of the Sfirot here, might or fear, the need for privacy and setting boundaries. So that is Gvura. So the positive side of Gvura is not anger, jealousy, hate, and fear. I didn't mention it here, I should have, in a negative sense, fear in a negative sense. Anger, jealousy, hate, fear are all connected. But fear in a positive sense, fear of God, is the concept of awe, A-W-E, the concept of awe. In other words, recognizing that there is something greater than you and being in awe of that. Now, this is not a concept that is very often spoken about in Western literature, certainly not in psychological literature, except perhaps in positive psychology. But the concept of fear and awe in a positive sense is very, very rarely spoken about, and at least that I know of, and I've read quite a lot of psychology literature. Anyone can correct me if they know of anything that discusses it, but in any event, it seems to me that that's the way it is. There's no positive aspect of fear, and I think that's very wrong, because fear has to do with respect. It has to do with realizing that there's something that's bigger than you. There's a statement of the sages that they say like this: if there is no fear, there's no wisdom, and if there's no wisdom, there's no fear. Now, what does that statement mean? If there's no fear, there is no wisdom. A person cannot come to the concept of wisdom without realizing that there is something greater than his own intellect. There is a mind out there, if you want to put it in these terms, that is greater than our minds. The divine presence, or the divine mind, if you want to call it that, the chokhmah of the Almighty, the chokhmah of God, the wisdom, intelligence, if you want to call it that, the supernal divine intelligence is far greater than our intelligence. So the fear of that, in other words, the awe one feels is in a sense, it's that self-transcendence. It's a self-transcendence that leads to that. Without that self-transcendence, there would be no wisdom. The word wisdom over here, let me just annotate. Let's see here. Draw, pencil. Yeah, okay, here we go. The word chokhmah over here that you see over here, the word chokhmah, can everyone see the screen? The diagram in the screen? Yeah? Hello? Anyone still awake? Okay, so the word chokhmah can be divided really into two words, right? Koach means the power of, or the potential for, koach, and ma, to be undifferentiated, right? To be undifferentiated. They say, let me just explain what undifferentiated means. There's a certain level of cells which are called, they call them stem cells. I'm sure everybody's heard of stem cell therapy, right? Stem cells. So what are stem cells? Stem cells are cells in their pristine state, in their original state, before they become differentiated, before they become cells which are part of the lungs, or cells which are part of the heart, or cells which are part of the skin, or cells which are part of the eyes. It's only when cells become differentiated that it's that they belong in a certain place. They have a certain geography. They have a certain location. But before they have that location, before they have that state of definition, they're as yet undefined. That's what the concept of ma is. Ma is like a stem cell, so to speak. It's the cell before it becomes defined. So koach ma is the power that we have, all of us have in our souls, the power to be undifferentiated, to be beyond, above, prior to differentiation. At that point in time, we're completely, so to speak, malleable and changeable. We're in the hands of the Almighty, the hands of God, and can be whatever He wants us to be. That's called koach ma. So when the Zohar and Kabbalistic literature talks about chokhmah, they talk about koach ma, right? The potential to be absolutely anything. The potential to be anything. So when the sages said, if there is no fear, there is no wisdom. In other words, if there's no recognition of something greater than you, there's no possibility of being able to be undifferentiated. Because it is only in that which is bigger than you that you are, when you immerse yourself into that, so to speak, that you're undifferentiated. That you're beyond definition, so to speak. And then they go on to say, and if there is no wisdom, then there is no fear. If there's no wisdom, there's no fear. In other words, if it wouldn't be for this greater than us, koach ma, this greater than us potential, we would never be able to experience this whole concept of fear. But that fear that we're talking about, when there's no wisdom, there's no fear, that fear is a completely transcendent fear. And that's that fear, so to speak, if you would call it fear. 1 second, let me go back to here. Yeah, so what transcends Chokhmah? What transcends Chokhmah is Keter. What transcends Chokhmah is Keter. So in other words, it is only if there's no wisdom, there's no fear, there's no concept of Keter. There's no concept of merging into the will of God. Right? There's no merging into the will of God. Ernest, you can go ahead if you want to say something. Go ahead, please. Write it in the chat box. You can write privately or whatever. Go ahead. Okay, so that is all talking about the concept of fear. What is the concept of shame? Well, that concept of shame is really, when we talk about that fear in a positive sense, that idea of shame is perhaps the wrong word. Shame has a very negative connotation in Western thought. It does not necessarily have the same connotation in Jewish thought. Yes, it's true that there was a concept. The first time that we come across the concept of shame is when it talks about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Chava, when they were walking around naked, and v'lo yitbashashu. They were not ashamed. They didn't have any shame. It was only afterwards, after the sin, that they came to the whole concept of shame. But the word for shame, as I mentioned before, where is it now? Let me just see here. Yeah, the word for shame, boshet, if you take the same letters and you turn them around, I'll just show you on the board, then it would spell the word tashef, right? Boshet, meaning shame, and tashev, to return, have the same letters because they're integrally connected. What is the purpose of shame? The purpose of shame is to return to the way you were before, to the way you were before the thing that is causing you shame, so to speak. Tashev, to return, and boshet are related. Shame is, yes, it's a negative feeling. It makes us feel bad. But it's also a very motivating thing if we use it properly. The purpose of shame is to move us back to return us to where we were originally, to our original source, to where we were originally before we became tainted. Through our own actions, through our own thoughts, through our own speech, whatever it may happen to be. So that idea of fear or awe, together with shame, the fear that is called boshet, embarrassment, shame, is a recognition of why it is that we should be ashamed. Why is it that we have any shame at all? We have shame because we realize that it's improper for us to have done what we did. There's a famous rabbi who was also a psychologist. His name is Rabbi Abraham Twersky. He's written a number of books. I'll just spell his last name over here. One second. Let's see here. Change to English. Okay. I think it's with a Y at the end. It could be with an I at the end. I don't know. Abraham Twersky. Anyway, he's written a large number of books actually, but in one of them, rabbi doctor, he has his own clinic, own psychology clinic, and he treats a lot of addictions and things like that. A very interesting, very, very interesting person. He comes from actually a family of Hasidic rabbis. He's a very, very accomplished and very, very interesting, very deep person. In any event, he tells a story of when he was a child. And in one of the books, I don't remember which one it was now, but he tells a story when he was a child, and he did something that he shouldn't have done. And his father was a very, very wise man, and his father brought him in, and oh, there's no screen. Is anyone else having the problem that there's no screen? Oh, what I typed you can't see. Oh, I'm sorry about that. All right, let me go back to that. Let's see. Can you see it now? Tashev? Oh, you're talking about Twersky. Here, I typed it in the chat box. That's where I typed it. I typed it in the chat. Okay. In any event, Twersky. Okay. No big deal. So he said that at some point in time he did something wrong. He doesn't remember what it was. And his father called him in. He was expecting to get really blasted or whatever it was. And his father didn't blast him. He didn't punish him. And he didn't. What he did was simply he simply said to him, "Es passt dir nicht," in Yiddish. Yeah, it's not fitting for you to do such a thing. It's not appropriate for you to have done that. He said that was the worst. That was the worst thing that his father could have said. In other words, it was actually the best thing that his father could have said, but it was the worst in the sense that it hit him the deepest. Had he got a smack or something like that, or been yelled at, you get the smack, you get yelled at, and that's the end of the story, right? And finished. I know that there are some people that have, were constantly smacked as children and maybe, very mistreated and so on and so forth. That could be, I don't deny that is true. But for this particular person here, for Rabbi Dr. Twersky, he said that like put knives in him, so to speak. When his father told him, it's unfitting for you to have done such a thing. It's not proper for you to have done such a thing. It made him realize the way his father saw him and the way he was behaving. His father saw him as someone for whom this action was improper. In other words, his father didn't see him as a lowlife, a good-for-nothing, a useless individual. How dare you do such a thing, kind of thing. Yeah, no. What it was that he does was probably minor anyway. But his father said, for you, for someone who has a soul, for someone who's been brought up in the way you were brought up, this is not proper. It's not fitting. It doesn't fit you. And that's what it means, this concept of Yira Boshit. A person realizes that I've been doing all of these things all of my life, and they're improper. They don't fit me. They're not who I am. I have this lofty soul. I have this tremendous potential. I have ancestors, if not parents, but at least I have ancestors who were holy people. And how could I possibly have done that? How could I possibly do such a thing? And then the point is not to dwell and wallow in the self-pity that you did such a thing, and wallow in the muck of a person's transgressions or whatever they are, but rather to turn around, tashev, right? To turn around, turn towards the light, so to speak. Turn towards who it is that you, and return to that person. Return to being who you really are. Return to being what you actually are, rather than the mistake that you made. I'd like to tell you a story of the Baal Shem Tov that, to a certain extent, illustrates this idea. As you probably know, the Jewish New Year is not celebrated like the secular New Year. The Jewish New Year is a time of tremendous self-reflection. It's a time of reflecting on what it is that we've achieved or failed to achieve, or let's say, and failed to achieve in the past year. It's a year of what's called Cheshbon HaNefesh, when you make a calculation of your soul, so to speak. In other words, you do the books, right? You make an accounting of yourself. What have I achieved in the past year? What have I not achieved? What did I set out to do? What did I actually do? And so on and so forth. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? It's a very reflective time. And then it's also a time of looking forward. What am I planning to do for the year to come? Right now, this takes some preparation, a whole month of preparation. In fact, the year before to do it properly. The month before to do it properly. But anyway, the Jewish New Year is not a time when you go out and party and fireworks and get drunk. It doesn't work like that. But, no, I'm not telling anybody what to do. I just want to set the stage for the story. So it was the Jewish New Year. The Jewish New Year lasts for 2 days, actually. The 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Anyway. During the prayers on the Jewish New Year are much longer than normal. They last like half a day, from sometime in the morning, depending on the congregation, but generally they last for several hours, anywhere between, let's say, 5 and 7, maybe even 8 hours, right? It could be a long day. In any event, during the prayers, the students of the Baal Shem Tov were praying together with him. And out of the pocket of one of them fell a little tin of snuff. Snuff was a very popular thing in those days. It's not very popular today, but it used to be popular. Today, that's cocaine or whatever people snort these days. But in those days, it was just snuff, right? So a tin of snuff fell out of the pocket of one of them, and another one of the Hasidim, another one of the followers and disciples of Baal Shem Tov noticed it, and he saw the man bend down, pick up his box of snuff, take a pinch of snuff, and just put the box back in his pocket, and he continued on. And he was thinking to himself, a pinch of snuff in the middle of prayers, like that's completely inappropriate. That's really not right. You know, what is he thinking? Doesn't he know that he's in the middle of the New Year Rosh Hashanah prayers? And he was like very sort of kind of disgusted and angry by this, and so on and so forth. Angry about it. The Baal Shem Tov sensed that on the student who had taken the pinch of snuff, who owned the snuff box, they descended because of the disdain of this other disciple who was a very lofty and elevated and learned person. But he caused, inadvertently, what's called a kitrug. Kitrug means an accusation against the snuff sniffer in heaven. Since he was so disparaging, since this particular rabbi was so disparaging of the person with the snuff box, so that became a disparagement, not only directly, but a disparagement in heaven as well. It made a kitrug, it made an accusation against him in heaven. And the result of the accusation was that he was going to pass away that coming year. The Baal Shem Tov sensed this, and he tried whatever he could to annul that decree of death on his student. And he tried for the whole day and the next day, and nothing, didn't work. He went on the subsequent days, even the day of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement, the holiest day on the Jewish calendar. Spend most of the day, if not all the day, in prayer. And it's a very holy and elevated time. The Baal Shem Tov tried on that day as well to nullify the decree on the student. And it didn't work. He was told that the only thing that could be done is if this student who made the accusation, who was the cause of the accusation, in other words, the one who thought disparagingly about his fellow, if he would be able to melamed zchut means to think about the situation in a different light, to think about it in a positive sense. If he could change his thinking process from disparagement to encouragement, then that would nullify the decree. So it was already after the time of Yom Kippur. It was now the day of, which is called Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah is the 5th day of Sukkot, which is the festival that follows the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. And that is the day that day is called Chotem B'toch Chotem, the seal within a seal. In other words, that's the day when everything is sealed. That's the day when everything is sealed. I'll come to that in a minute, Ernest. I'll reply in a minute. That's the day on which everything is finally sealed and delivered, so to speak, for the year. Although there's always a chance to change things. But nevertheless, that's when things are generally finally sealed. So, it was the day of Hoshana, or rather the night of Hoshana Rabbah. And the night of Hoshana Rabbah, there is a special, we stay up the whole night, and the whole day, obviously, and read something that is called the Tikun. The Tikun means the rectification. There's a whole bunch of prayers and meditations and so on called the rectification, to rectify anything that needs rectification. Anyway, these two men were again present at the Baal Shem Tov, with the Baal Shem Tov when they were going through the Tikun. And the Baal Shem Tov knew that this was the last opportunity that he had. So what did he do? He took away, how he did it, I have no idea, but he took away the concentration of this particular person, of the person who made the accusation, the accuser, let's call him. He took away the concentration of the accuser, so she couldn't focus on his prayers and on his meditations. He couldn't focus properly. So he put down his book from which he was saying it, and he was walking backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And he started thinking about why is it that in our generation snuff has become so popular. Just sort of fell into his head. Now, it didn't just fall into his head, it was the Baal Shem Tov putting it into his head, so to speak. But he was thinking, why is it that in our generation snuff has become such a popular thing? And he was walking backwards and forwards and trying to figure out an answer. And then an answer came to him. Perhaps it is because all of us are required to do what's called birurim. Birurim means to elevate the sparks of holiness that fell during the shattering of the vessels, something that I've spoken about before. There was the shattering of the vessels of the world of Tohu. And from that shattering of the vessels, these sparks of holiness fell down into the mundane world. And our task is to elevate those sparks. Now, one of the ways in which people elevate, one of the primary ways in which we elevate those sparks is by using things for positive ends, for positive things. For example, eating with the right intentions. Eating food is one of the primary ways in which we elevate the sparks, which is why all the laws of kosher apply. Kosher laws tell us we're not allowed to eat certain foods because that food contains sparks that cannot be elevated in the regular way, by Jews anyway, by Jewish people. So we're not allowed to eat those kinds of foods. But even when you do eat the food and it's kosher food, there has to be a certain amount of concentration that's involved in elevating these particular sparks. So this man was thinking, the accuser was thinking, maybe the reason that that snuff has become such a popular thing in recent generations, in recent years, is because there's a spark of holiness in the snuff that only very lofty souls could elevate. It's not food, which is more coarse. It's elevating things not through eating, but through scent, through smelling, through the scent of the snuff. And maybe that's why. And then he got his concentration back and he went in and completed the Tikun and so on and so forth. Now, the Baal Shem Tov had a custom that during the day of Hoshana Rabbah, during this particular day, anyone could come, any one of his disciples or other people would come and they could ask him any question and he would give them an answer. So this particular man, the accuser, came to ask the Baal Shem Tov his question. And the question was, the question that he had was, why is snuff so popular in our generations? Why is it only something that happened in our generations? So the Baal Shem Tov looked at him and he said to him, well, tell me what you think. So the man gave his conclusion that maybe it's to elevate very refined sparks and elevate them up higher. And the Baal Shem Tov said, yes. And what else were you thinking at that time? So he said, well, I was thinking at that time about a certain person whom I saw picking up a box of snuff on the Jewish New Year, on Rosh Hashanah, and taking a pinch of snuff. And at first I was very taken aback and put off by this. But I was thinking afterwards that maybe the reason for that is that he was elevating a spark. So the Baal Shem Tov said to him, exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And not only that, but you should know that that man had a kitrug, he had an accusation against him that he would have died within the year, and now you just rectified it. Now you just rectified it. Now, what does that have to do with our story, with our idea over here? See, the rectification comes about when you turn things around. From boshet, meaning being ashamed, that sense of shame, it's not good enough to be left with a sense of shame. A sense of shame is only your starting position. From the sense of shame has to come toshev. You have to turn it around into different letters, so to speak, and return to where you were before the shame. And then the shame has a positive impetus on your life, a positive impact on your life. Otherwise, it's useless. What's the point of having shame if it doesn't lead you to anywhere? And it can be a very positive experience if you use it right. So that's what the concept of this week's word is in the Zohar, Yira Boshet. Okay, let me just answer a question or two over here. Is it true that Rabbi Akiva, it wasn't Rabbi Akiva, it was Rabbi Shimon. It was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, and his son, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Eliezer. That's exactly the right point. Yes, Ernest, that's exactly true. It was Rabbi Shimon, though, not Rabbi Akiva, who who was in the cave for 12 years and came out, and they saw people just plowing in the fields and doing what people do during the day, and they just looked. And wherever they looked, they were so disappointed at what they saw that the fields just started burning up. They started burning. They caught a light and they started burning. It was because of their anger. They'd been 12 years immersed totally in spirituality, immersed totally in meditation. And when they came out of the cave and they saw that people were immersed in the physical world, they were shocked. A voice came out of heaven and said, go back into the cave. They had to go back into the cave for another year until they could come out of the cave and use that power to rectify. So what happened now when they came out of the cave, one of the first things that Rabbi Shimon said, is there anything that needs rectification? And they told him that there's a graveyard that people have to walk around it because they're not sure where the graves are, and people, in order to maintain a state of spiritual purity, couldn't walk through or over the graveyard, they had to walk around. And if we knew where the graves were, we wouldn't walk around. We would walk through, but not walk on the graves. And that would help. That's one of the things that he did right away. And there were many, many others. So yes, that's a very good point, Ernest. 100%. So somebody asks, that's on where they lost, how to move out of the shame and go to what they were before. So that is something I think that would require a private consultation. I don't think it's something I could deal with on an individual basis with everybody together, but it's a question that was sent privately. I'm not mentioning the name for obvious reasons, but I would suggest you get hold of me privately, and we can work on it from there. Okay. Any more questions? I meant to mention this before, but I am available for private consultations, and this was just a very good opening for mentioning it. I'll be probably putting up on the website a new page on the website KabbalahDecoder.com that will be explaining what it is that I do in these private consultations. Well, whatever, we'll talk about it. I'll send everybody maybe an email with it as well, just in case someone's interested in consulting on this. Okay. Any other questions? Too much and just enough. Okay. Not today, tomorrow call, because I'm right after this class I have to run out. It seems that to rectify is a combination of reframing our perspective, forgiving and making amends. Yes. Forgiving and making amends, forgiving those people that perhaps have hurt us, making amends with those people whom we have hurt, and forgiving and making amends with ourselves in some cases. We tend to be our own biggest critics. Not everybody. Some people are narcissistic and they're not their own biggest critics, but a lot of people are. And they get stuck in their own criticisms of themselves and can never move beyond that. That's also a negative thing. Unfortunately, there are spiritual paths that are very prone to this misunderstanding. I've heard from a lot of people that there are certain branches of well, let me not go into it. I'm not going to point out particular religions, but let's say that there are there are approaches to things where you regard yourself as, you come down too hard on yourself, and then you can't really, you can't move forward. I mean, one of the beautiful things about the Song of Songs, I'm sure all of you have heard of the Song of Songs. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of literature, but completely misunderstood generally. It's usually interpreted as a love song of King Solomon to his lover, to his wife, to his lover. But it's actually a love song of God to his creations and their response. It's a love song between two lovers, not King Solomon and his wife, but rather God and his people. That's what it's all about. And we are called, human beings are called like God's companion. Who else has the ability to even think about God, never mind converse with? I mean, I've never seen, a cow sitting down and having conversation with the Almighty. I don't think it happens. All right, here's the website. KabbalahDecoded.com. I'm trying to set up another website that's going to be exclusively for sort of the psychological side of Kabbalah, but we don't really have to go there. There's a I just go to this website. I'm going to put up an article on it. It's basically going to be called Recoding. Yeah, Kabbalah Decoded, and it's going to be basically recoding, sort of recoding one's inner being. There's various ways of doing it, and that's what it's going to be all about. Let me just put this publicly, because I think there's more than one person that wants it. Let me write here to everyone. For those of you who don't know it, there we go, KabbalahDecoded.com. It's my website. So I'm going to try and work on this recoding idea for anyone who's interested. There's certain methodologies which we use, but we could talk about that privately. Okay. Any other questions, folks? Recoding, I like that. Okay, I will keep you informed. The ceiling is not actually black. It's wood color. It's just I don't know. You can't really see, but let me here the guy. You see, it's all wood. That's the original. I mean, this is my basement, as my wife calls it, my hole, the wall. Anyway, whatever. That's where I hang out most of my day, and that ceiling is actually wood. Yep. All right, folks. Any other questions? Man cave, yes. All right. Okay, folks. So let's leave it at that, and we'll meet again probably next week. See ya, and have a great week. You're very welcome. I'm looking forward to about 12 inches of snow tonight and tomorrow. So, all righty. Have a good one. All the best.